all this education, and still none of that prepared me and taught me how to make learning happen in the room. It's not about right or wrong. It's about, you know what, we've got all this cognitive science and all this research now that, helps us know how learning works better. And so now that we know better, we should do better.
So it becomes like not really about producing learning. It's really like a structural impossibility.
The lack of actual learning happening, right? There's a lot of compliant work happening. Don't even start about grades. What's in that grade book? Not everything in that grade book is about learning. That's basically, I kind of built a framework of what a typical lesson would look like. I'll say this, there's nothing wrong with teaching. If you're a teacher and you show up to work every day and you're not there to intentionally harm children, you've done everything right.
All right. Welcome back to the Supported Learning Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Joe Sebastian. I am joined by my guest today, Jason Kennedy. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Joe.
Appreciate you being here and your time. So I'm going to get a little background here in a second, but from a decade of teaching the wrong way to literally writing the book on how to fix it and the system he built that's changing how classrooms actually produce learning. That's what we're covering today with Jason Kennedy. Again, welcome back to the Supported Learning Podcast. I'm Dr. Joe Sebastian. Families often ask me how to navigate the maze of college prep without wasting thousands of dollars and years of time. The answer usually involves finding the people who have figured out the rules of the game that schools aren't telling you. That's why I'm thrilled to have Jason Kennedy here today. He is a 24-year educator, district curriculum director, instructional coach, and the author of Let's Stop Teaching and Start Designing Learning. He's also the creator of Let's Quit Teaching Movement, provocative call to transform passive classrooms into active learning environments backed by the science of how people actually learn. We're going to dive into why most classrooms are still built around compliance, something I've mentioned personally a lot of times in my calls, instead of learning what design learning actually looks like in practice and what parents should know about what's happening or not happening in their kids' classroom. Again, Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Joe. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Absolutely. So I give them the highlight reel, but I want to hear from you, give us the 60-second snapshot of who you are. What's the specific problem you're trying to solve in education?
Well, just reflecting on, I got about halfway through my career before I just had that light bulb moment and was like, you know what? I'd gone to college, I got my bachelor's degree, right away a master's degree, then a specialist degree, all this education, and still none of that prepared me and taught me how to make learning happen in the room. I got fed a lot of content. Just content heavy. I'm a secondary English major, so I can tell you all about Shakespeare and all sorts of, poetry and all this other stuff. But no, I got set loose in a classroom just like the majority of all the teachers in America, turned loose without knowing exactly how to make learning happen in the room. And what I realized halfway through was that's the actual job,
right? Is
to produce learning and not just teach content.
Right. So, okay. So for a moment, because so many parallels here to my journey, but let's go back to your first years as an English teacher. What did your classroom look like in those early years? And what did you think good teaching was?
Well, I basically went in and did what was done to me, but I tried to make it better. And for the lack of any technical words, just try to make it more engaging, more appealing to the kids that were in front of me. So, and I'll say this, there's nothing wrong with teaching, right? There's nothing wrong with it. If you're a teacher and you show up to work every day and you're not there to intentionally harm children, you've done everything right, right? It's not about right or wrong. It's about, we've got all this cognitive science and all this research now that came out, early 2000s and even more so now that, helps us know how learning works better. And so now that we know better, we should do better. And so my early classrooms looked like a lot of other classrooms, sage on the stage, kids doing their work, nice compliant classroom, kids mostly engaged, but still, I left a lot of learning on the floor because I didn't know what it took to make learning happen in the room.
So what was the moment that you realized, I've been doing this all wrong? You actually apologized to your former students in your book. So where was that moment, that breakthrough moment there?
Well, it was just like I said about the early 2000s. We start getting all this research, like meta analysis, like big John Hattie fan, uh, Doug Fisher, Nancy Fry, Peter DeWitt, lots of the heavy hitters around what science says works best for learning. And some of it we do innately as teachers, but the thing is, you know, we get taught or given expectations as teacher for lesson plans. So we make all these plans, and the word plan, whenever I work with teachers in districts, I tell them, look at that word plan and tell me all the things you think about it. And usually they say sequence, steps, actions, whatever else. And so when you think about a plan, we think about, okay, I'm going to do this first, second, third, fourth order of events, right? But then I have them say, okay, well, now what do you think about that word design? What does that mean? What do you think about that? And they think about creativity and purpose, and the word that most often comes up is the word intentional, right? And that's what a design is about, is we want learning to happen on purpose at high levels for all the learners in the room. And we want to have that happen as effectively and efficiently as possible. And we have to design for that to happen. We just can't, if I can get up here and teach all class period long, but if nobody learned anything, I just gave a nice presentation.
Telling is not teaching, right? Or not. Right. We can get really, really nerd out here in the instructional design, but I guess, let's start with the college preparatory program, because I'm also secondary education, social studies background. So, you say you were taught content in college, but never taught how learning actually works. So I guess just explain to us, how is it possible after years of education courses that we're actually not taught how learning happens and what that actually looks like to teach learning?
Well, I mean, again, we're talking about, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2000. So, I mean, I had educational psychology class where you learn about your Piaget and your Dewey and some other, kind of big historical names, but we also didn't have a lot of meta-analysis and huge meta research, with effect sizes attached. And then along comes John Hattie and some other researchers that kind of delved into, okay, here's what seems to be working best for learning, and here's why it works, or here's some things that come up. And I've seen, some of the employees that come in through our district and some other teachers I've coached in the past, especially ones recently graduated, they're getting more of that in college now than I ever did. But still, we still got a long way to go, because we still got a lot of there's even more research coming out about cognitive science, right, and working memory and attention and all this stuff that still is just new areas, new frontiers that should affect what we take to the classroom, because it's all about learning.
Yeah, that's exactly what we see, that like the system really trains teachers to deliver content, especially at the secondary level. So it becomes like not really about producing learning. It's really like a structural impossibility we talk about constantly. They're just the content deliverers, the arbitrator of truth, right? So like it's the same gap we see in AP students inside of our program. They've been taught to just memorize and comply for like 10 plus years in education. And then they're hit with an AP exam or an IB exam or something advanced, right, where they actually requires them to think, execute under pressure, essentially higher level Bloom skills than just knowledge and understanding. And the foundation is never built. They actually don't know how to think critically. They don't know how to answer those problems. So you realize the old way was broken. What did you build instead?
Well, just taking some of what my book mainly was a catalyst moment was when my teachers, and I was an instructional coach at the school, was, what does this look like? Kennedy, just what is it supposed to look like? What should we be doing? And what would the kids be doing? What does it look like from start to finish? And so that's basically, I kind of built a framework of what a typical lesson would look like in any normal classroom, any content area, and just spelled it out. Hey, this amount of time spent on this amount of time spent on this, and also not just what to do, but why it works for learning. And going back to your point about AP and IB, just it's why kids leave high school and that freshman year is just such a cluster for them, because I got to do now as a freshman in college, I got to learn how to learn. right? Because all I did was regurgitate content. But in college, depending on the professor, it's a lot different than high school. The test looks nothing like what you heard the lecture for in class, and you've got to do all the digging in of the content on your own. And we don't teach kids how to do that, right? And you have to learn how to learn, and so that's why it's such a challenge for some of our kids after they leave us.
Yeah, you say we need to quit teaching and start designing learning. I guess break that down for any parent listening. What does it actually mean? What's the difference between teaching and designing learning?
Right. Well, again, it's more about is that here's the outcome I want, and here's the things I'm going to put in place intentionally to make that happen on purpose, right? I can teach and accidentally have learning happen. And don't get me wrong, there are teachers teaching their hearts out every day, and there's some learning happening. But my thing is, if maybe we learned more about what it takes for learning to happen and put those things intentionally in place every day, not just when it feels right, or if the assignment calls for it, or if the content calls for it. These are the pieces every day to design learning, to make learning happen on purpose at the highest levels for every kid in the room, not just those kids, not just these kids, not just some kids. It's more of a mind shift than anything. Is, hey, my job is not here to teach. My job is here to make learning happen with these group of kids, no matter who walks in the door.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, especially hearing it from another perspective, because it's like we're challenging people who are good who are good in education are really good at being compliant, at sitting there like in there. They're used to like the Socratic method, like a college lecturer, and that's not actually learning. We learn by doing. What you're getting into as well as like learning design, and so I get it from both ends because I'm still an active administrator in a school, and I also run this program. And so I'm getting there's a lot of different teaching going on across the country. We had a huge teacher exodus from COVID. And so learning looks different a lot of places. But I mean, it was beaten into me in year 2 of what good instructional design is. It's a learning target or objective and a measurable outcome with some type of assessment. And those two components alone, well, not so much the objective, but literally, did kids learn? How do we know they learned? Because I took some kind of measurement. Does not happen consistently in almost any classroom on a daily basis because it is hard to do. So I guess, what are the key components in a well-designed learning experience that you at least have seen or that you actually teach teachers to do?
It all goes back to the I tell teachers all over the place that I work with, if there was one thing, if I could just say one thing to work on to get really great at about learning is success criteria, right? And here's why. Because if I really work at success criteria, and what I mean by that is, okay, the learning is in the doing. You've said that we learn by doing. And so at some point in the lessons, I've got to quote unquote do something, not for compliance, but for learning. Right. So this kid's got this something to do, right? I need to know what successful evidence of learning looks like for this, right? What does good quality evidence of learning look for this? Now, that needs to be in the kid's hands before I turn them loose in it, because they need to say, okay, here's where I am. Here's where Mr. K wants me to go. And here's what he's told me to go access, work through, try, whatever to get there. I tell teachers success criteria because when you look at it and you try to spell out what successful learning looks like for this task, sometimes they discover, I can't come up with something for this. And that tells me that's a poor task for learning, because sometimes we find out that, this task is mainly compliance based. It's not about learning. But it also forces us to look at, does this task produce evidence of learning, right? If this is the target, if this is where we say the bar is today, if this is the goal, then is this task getting the kids to that goal? And again, and this is another reason why success criteria is the magic sauce, is I can't give you feedback unless I know where you are, where you need to go, the learning target, where you are, success criteria, and what the next steps are. That's how feedback works. And so I wrote a post a while ago about how we're asking kids the wrong questions as parents when they come home. We ask them, what did you learn at school today? And when you were asked that, and when I was asked that, you ask any kid that, the answer is like, I have nothing. I don't know. Right. The real question we should be asking our kids is, what feedback did you get about your learning today? Because that is when we know that, hey, they're just not getting fed stuff. They are being told constructive things that's going to move them upward in their learning. And you can't get feedback without a target and success criteria together.
Ballpark for me, how far away are we from that being universally accepted in classes?
I mean, here's the thing about acceptance. We chase this thing called buy-in, right? But buy-in's all adults. That's adult feelings, adult wants, adult needs. It's how I feel. You got to get to a point with your staff at a school and say, here's what we believe about learning. Here's why we believe it. And here's what we're going to commit to, because this is who we are. And that's what culture is. Culture is what we do. Climate's how it feels. This is the culture we're creating at this school because we are committing to, by God, this job's hard. No doubt about it. Hard, probably one of the hardest jobs there are. But all the more reason why we should come together, because it's so hard. We can't do it alone. All the reason more we should come together and say, these are the collective commitments we're making to each other, to our kids, to our community. Whenever we walk in this door, this is what we do because this is who we are. And sometimes it takes them seeing the success, because that's what motivates us. We talk about kids being, big complaint for teachers. See, kids aren't motivated. We're not motivated, right? That's why all of us have already broken our New Year's resolutions. It's just now March. I mean, most of them were broken in the second Friday of the new year. But literally, we're not motivated as adults. So we have to come together and make commitments around some things that we believe in.
So you talk about the ratio that, would probably be shocking to parents, that really direct instruction should be happening 25% of the time, and 75% should be filled with probably the kids actually doing something, demonstrating learning. Let's talk about learning targets, because I mentioned that here in a minute, and the success criteria. So starting with, students should walk in class knowing exactly what's expected of them, what they're learning, and what success looks like. I assume that you tie that to an assessment or a measurement, right? So we kind of talked about how many classes actually do that, but the distinction between students and learners, what is the difference, and why does that shift in language change everything?
Well, it's going back to, let's stop teaching and start designing learning. We all want learners to walk in our room, right? Because a student studies, a learner learns, right? That's the distinction in my mind. And you're like, I don't have a choice in who comes in my room. I'll have students or I'll have learners. No. If I want students to come to my room, that I'll have a task prepared, there'll be an agenda on the board, they'll know what to do, they sit down, they do it, they turn it in, they walk out the door, we come back again the next day and do it all over again. That's a student-filled classroom. But a learner-filled classroom, they will come in and we'll activate our prior knowledge and curiosity around what the learning is of the day. They're going to know what the target is. They're going to be introduced to the success criteria of what the upcoming task is. And I'm going to know we're going to talk about what tools they're going to have to access when they get stuck, or any tools or pathways they want to get through to take their learning to the next level. I'm going to let them loose in that task. And I'm going to monitor and give feedback based on that success criteria and the tools that they're working through the whole time. And then at the end, we're going to summarize the learning of the day. And we're going to come together and say, hey, what discoveries were made? Not mistakes. What discoveries were made today in our learning? How do we get past them? Where are we at now? Where are we going next? And that's where you have a room full of learners who are collaborating, critically thinking, looking at tools, choosing which ones they work best for them, digging themselves out of their own pit. Because here's the thing, kids' number one favorite tool to use in the classroom is this right here, right? And some of the biggest successes I've seen, especially in high schools, is showing teachers, hey, give these kids tools to go access besides this. And if your success criteria is clear and they know what to do for the task, 75% of your room will be off and running. So let's say I always had a class of like 32 when I taught. I got a class of 32. 75% of those are off and running. The 5 or 6 that really need my focused attention to get them started, there's where I am the first couple of minutes of the work session. Now, once I get them started, I'm up and I'm checking on the others. And I'm going to circle back to these guys. But if everybody knows where to access the tools, they know what success looks like, and they know how to move themselves upward, I I've already given them the gist, the guided information, skills, and tools that they need to take on the task. I've done my part as the instructor. Now my part is the facilitator. Feedback, feedback, feedback the whole time. And then we come together at the end and summarize it. So.
Well, I hit on this a lot about, I do a lot of calls with parents looking to come aboard our programs for APs. And so there's a couple different types of parents, but the ones that enroll maybe late October till about February, they're all reacting to a grade. The kid's a straight A student, and this is their first B in an AP class. I'm like, well, it's hard, and really boils down to two things. That either they're being graded by how the actual AP exam looks, like they're struggling because they don't know how to critically think, they don't know how to critically write. No one's actually teaching them. So the teacher is covering content and expecting them to be at a higher level of Bloom's on the AP exams. Or the other reason, my kid has an A, I'm fine, but then we actually go into the A. What is the A actually measuring? The A is measuring a project. It's A homework, right? So you talk about this and just like having fun without any type of structure, without any times of learning activities. What does that essentially look like in practice? Fun without function. Kind of break that down in terms of, this is something that is typical in classes in that we call them, they're coded as learning activities, but they're just something we get the kid to do during the class, and it's not actually tied to real learning. So can you give an example of like what that looks like, that fun without the function, that engaging activities aren't actually tied to learning?
Right. So whenever we talk about a task, it's got in these two things. We design a task for two purposes. Number one, to produce evidence of learning, but also number two, to engage our kids, right? And don't get engagement twisted. Engagement is not entertainment, right? Engagement is there to create the urge to participate, the urge to get involved. So and engagement's necessary. I can't achieve at anything if I don't engage with it first. So we got to have engagement and we got to have evidence of learning. Got to have both. The fun, if you want to call it anything, that's the engagement part. The function, evidence of learning, that's the production part. So I'll give you an example. I had to go on an accreditation visit several years ago, and it was to a different district in the state, and we visited a bunch of schools, and I walked into a middle school 7th grade life science class, and I think they were studying DNA structure. So some of the part, they give us questions, and we have to go ask the kids. If you ever performed the Elliott instrument for observations, that's what this was. So I asked the evaluators to go around and talk to the kids a lot about their learning. So I went around, 28 kids in the room. I probably asked 10 or more kids, hey, what are you learning? And the activity was they were taking beads and putting them on pipe cleaners to represent a DNA sequence, right? So I went around and I asked 10 or more different kids, hey, what are you doing? What are you learning? How you're learning it, whatever. All these 10 kids was like, I don't know, I'm just putting beads on pipe cleaner. So the fun was, but they were engaged. They were all doing the work. They were all in it. So the fun was there, but the function was not, right? And that's called glittering details in the research world. It has a negative effect size, negative 0.33, which is almost a negative year's worth of learning lost. Because we're making fun activities that don't produce evidence of learning. You got to have both. Or we might have a task that produces evidence of learning, but we're not making it clear to the kids in the room that, hey, this is producing learning. This is how. They're not making the connection. And that's what our job is, to make these connections with our kids.
Say that tier 1 instruction, which I love this because this follows, for those other educators out there, MTSS framework, right? So the basic instruction every student receives is the foundation. Everything else depends on. So true. But why? What happens when tier 1 is broken? Why is it so hard to fix when it's in action, when it is actually fundamentally broken?
Right. So my personal school district, we're going through a strategic plan renewal. So we're writing a new district strategic plan. And what we're talking about is improving tier 1 instruction, but I don't want to call it tier 1 instruction because we've been saying tier 1 instruction too long. and it's kind of lost. It's just become this thing, this ethereal thing that nobody knows really what to call it. So I've started calling it a guaranteed and viable learning, right? I don't call it curriculum because we get that twisted too. When I say curriculum, we automatically think what came in that box, right? Or this program or whatever else. That is not our curriculum. If you want to define what curriculum is, that is what we teach. And what you teach are your state standards, right? That is what we teach. So your state curriculum, your state standard is your curriculum. That thing that came in a box, that's a resource. You know your kids, that company that sent you that box doesn't. So you got to know who's in the room, your kids, what you need to teach, the curriculum, and how learning works to make this design thing work. So tier 1, having a framework that all teachers, no matter the grade or the content, can operate inside of, that include all the necessary things that make learning work at the highest levels without taking away autonomy and creativity on the teacher's part. That's what tier 1, aka guaranteed viable learning. Call it guaranteed viable learning because you're guaranteeing it as the designers of learning, or I like to call us, let's don't call ourselves teachers anymore. We're learning engineers, right? So as the learning engineers in this building, we guarantee that we are designing the best learning possible, and it's viable for every kid that walks in that room. Not just these kids from this side of the tracks, not from just this color kid or this socio. Every kid who walks in the room, this is going to be viable for. And the priority is learning. So guaranteed viable learning for every kid in the room. You have that. And having that framework, that tier 1 framework, is so essential because these are the non-negotiables. These are the boundaries. And I kind of liken it to a professional basketball, right? You got the Michael Jordans, LeBron James of the world who do these amazing things and are remembered forever for it. But they still operate within the boundaries of the court and the restrictions of the rules of the game. Tier 1 framework does the same thing for teachers. Here's the rules of the game. Here's the boundaries you operate in, but you can still be as creative as you want, given that you're still focused on what works best for learning.
So for parents out there that maybe go to back to school nights or might have a conference with a teacher or something in terms of they're getting into the school and they have a chance to interact with their students' teachers. What are the signs that real learning design is happening or isn't in the classroom? What could they look for to potentially figure out if this is happening?
I mean, like I said earlier, ask your kid, what feedback did you get today? Because if there's not really any feedback other than the grade that comes on the paper or good job, which both of those are the least effective form of feedback according to research, then we're just doing school like we've always done. But if they're given real and we should be giving feedback every day, right? Because if we've got this practice in place where we have a target that everybody's shooting for, there's a goal, there's a finish line for the day. Here's what success looks like. Where are you at in your journey? I ought to be talking to kids. You know, the whole thing about this education thing, and this is why we will never be replaced with AI fully if we're doing this education thing the right way, is it is a human experience, right? It takes connections and it takes emotions and it takes all that stuff. It takes care, and feedback is part of that. So if you're seeing feedback, if you're happen to be at the school and you physically look around the room, if you're seeing like tools that kids can go interact with, and I'm talking, when I say kids, K-12, they're all kids. If there's tools up on the wall that learners can go access and see and work through, that's another sign. Something more than a rolling cart full of Chromebooks and a stack of books.
Well, let's talk grades for a second. Because I see it a lot inside the kids who come into the program. But parents' definition of my kid is a good student. They get good grades. They behave well. They're in the top classes. But then they get hit with an AP exam or an SAT and they underperform. Based on your research, why does this happen?
Well, you know what? If I'm quiet and I do my work and I turn it in and I don't make any waves, I can hide from learning all day long, right? I can play school as a student all day long and I could graduate an honor graduate. and still there's a news story right now. An honor graduate is suing her school system because she graduated functionally illiterate, right? Because of the lack of actual learning happening, right? There's a lot of compliant work happening. And don't even start about grades. What's in that grade book? Not everything in that grade book is about learning. Right. I liken it to when I taught to teachers. I remember back in the day when I wanted to stay home from school myself as a kid, one of two things had to happen. I either had to have a fever or I had to be throwing up. Nobody liked to throw up. So when mom would bring that thermometer in, she'd walk out of the room. I'd go find a light bulb. Right. And it'd get up to 104. No, I don't want to go to the emergency room. Shake that thing back down to about 100, 101 at the most, because I don't want to go to the doctor, but I just want to stay home from school. That's what's in some of our grade books right now. Inflation. Think about the graduation rates, especially after COVID happened, because we threw threw everybody on a computer and said, do these assignments and you'll get your grade, right? And we've had double-digit increases since COVID in graduation rates in some places because what's in the grade book. Think about it. What does an 86 mean in 10th grade English? What does that mean? What's an 86? If you can't tell me, then, which is why I love, especially in the younger grades, a lot of school systems use standards-based report cards.
Standards-based report,
same things, which they should be, because that's, I ought to be able to show mastery of this standard, your curriculum, before I leave this grade. But again, college needs those grades. High school, we're complaining about the weather, but we made the rain when it comes to grades sometimes. So we're conditioned for a grade.
Yeah, but do you think so how do we move forward without fundamentally breaking the entire system and changing it? Because I do believe, especially with the AP program, it's standard based. It's the closest thing we got to a national high school curriculum. It's all measuring skills. It's already right there. It's going to be standard based. But the grades are important if you want to get to a good school, but the grade can be based off of almost nothing. That's where I'm like, I get kids in this program, and sometimes they're not onboarded correctly, or I don't know what my kid's supposed to do. I'm like, well, okay, they have a Slack channel. Parents are in it. I have it's literally step-by-step directions, 3 steps, like a sentence each, and then a video walking through those 3 steps each. And they still need explanation. I'm like, okay, so your kid has a 4.2 GPA and they're going to be a doctor. And functionally, I've given them a 3-step process and they can't think. I'm like, there's something about book smarts and street smarts. It's kind of like the old adage of, the business owners are all got C's and A students work for them. So what is going to have to change for this to happen? Because kids who want to go to college are paper chasing the grade, but it's not demonstrating learning. The grade means nothing to me. I literally say, I don't care if you got 104. If you don't know how to do this, if you can't write a document-based question response or rhetorical analysis, what does that matter? You're going to fail the exam.
The only thing I can think of as a solution would be to go to some kind of portfolio system based on actual standards, K-12, and having, and you're like, well, that's just preposterous. That still leaves a lot of gray areas. That whole grade book is gray area,
right,
dude?
It's so true.
Right? It's full of notebook checks and, get this form signed by your parent, you got 100. Just all sorts of junk that doesn't mean anything about learning. And so, and again, since colleges, not like the schools in a state or in a system, colleges are all over the place with all different sorts of requirements, and everybody's feeding into them. It's hard to bring all that into a consolidated kind of system that's any more complicated than a ABCD system, which again goes back to, we're talking about industrial revolution type of stuff, grading.
Do you think we should move to more of like you said, portfolio, almost in defense of why I should graduate, why I should move on from a 10th grade, and a portfolio defense, almost a defense of the learning that took place?
We do that with our doctoral students, right?
Right.
I defend my dissertation. defend your right to be able to attend this college. Yeah, that would be a laborious process.
Right.
Herculean task to evaluate every kid who wants to go to college that way. But you'd have a clearer picture of what kind of learner that was rather than the 4.2 GPA they have, because you have no idea how that was earned. So many hands in that pot.
Right.
GPA over the years. Different teachers. I mean, some of those GPAs were probably earned back in middle school, even in middle school, with
carry over.
hospital classes. So, again, it would take some revolutionary and monumental, reinvention of what we.
Let me ask you this question before our lightning round here. Probably last question. What is the biggest lie the education system tells parents about their child's readiness for college?
I mean, just the fact that when I get that diploma, I'm ready to go to college. Right? Again, they fly, especially if kids go off to college. It's even more of a world shaking. But even if they stay home in a community college or our state college, they have to learn and teach themselves how to learn that first year or two before they really get, into a rhythm. And some classes they don't, because some classes are just like the ones in high school. As long as I get the content and regurgitate it on a test, I'm fine. But then there's some classes where I've got to do some really heavy lifting and learning and do some critical thinking and some analysis and all this other stuff on top of not being food sped the content by the instructor, because we've all had those college instructors. I had one. Nothing that happened in class was on the test. It was completely different, and so I had to learn the test after I bombed the first one. I learned what she tested like. And then the rest of the time I taught myself how to master her type of testing. And that was just one course out of the 120 hours I got for my bachelor's. So, just because you get a diploma does not, and I'll also say this, not every kid needs to go to college. Because I've got 3 boys, one not academically inclined at all, but I can put him in any car or any kind of motor and he could take it apart and put it back together better than it was before. Our local Marine base is having trouble finding diesel mechanics for $50 an hour because everybody else is paying $100 an hour. So, and we're going to really see this come to fruition with AI, I believe, because AI is going to replace a lot of these jobs. But AI is not going to replace the plumber, electrician, welder. And so we're going to see tremendous growth in some of these blue collar jobs that we kind of neglected for so many years because there's not anybody around. You're going to have these guys making 6 figures easily because we've got to build the things that the AI is going to do. So just if I had to tell parents anything, know your kid and don't just trust what the diploma said about them or what the grade book says about them.
How old are your kids right now? Because I have 3 girls.
I've got a 27-year-old, a 23-year-old, and a 20-year-old.
So mine are 10, 8, and gonna be 6. And I honestly, I'm a lifelong educator, been there for 6. I don't know, sitting here right now with the direction AI is going, if I would recommend any of them go to college. At this point, I just unless you're going to be a specialized doctor, like something that's going to require a professional degree, it might be better off learning a trade and then owning one of the business in that trade because heck, like you just said, the plumbers are going to be the next millionaires because no one's going to want to plumb. No, until the robots are sophisticated enough. And I think AI is going to disrupt way more entry level white collar work in the next 5 years than a robot replacing every piece of human activity. So you're definitely right on that. So, all right, great. Well, I'm going to move into rapid fire. It does not require an explanation. I do break my own rules. You can do it, but just basically about 6 rapid fire questions. Just first thing that comes to mind. Got it?
Sure thing.
All right, cool. Most overrated thing happening in classrooms right now?
Discovery learning. Kids don't know what they don't know. That's why you're there.
Right.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying there's a time and a place for it. Just like anything else.
One thing parents overthink about their kids' education.
Look, getting into the right college, because I can't tell you how many, and I, especially as an educator, didn't matter where the piece of paper came from. I'm getting paid just like the next guy. So he might have paid $60,000 for his college degree. I paid 20. I'm getting paid the same.
Right. One thing parents underthink.
They underthink that their kids are actually ready for college. They really think that diploma's going to do it for them, but no, they're going to need more than just that piece of paper.
If you could whisper one piece of advice to every parent dropping their kid off at school tomorrow morning, what would it be?
Again, don't ask them what they learned when you pick them up. Ask them what feedback they got today about their learning, and just see what happens.
One book every educator and every parent should read.
I mean, it reads like a brain science, almanac, but just Visible Learning by John Hattie. I geek out over it, but it's a hard read.
Still gold standard too of it, of that data-driven responses. So, and then where is education headed in the next 3 to 5 years with AI?
My fear is that we will have more kids from more affluent backgrounds heading to the AI-driven, computer-based virtual learning, because you know what? They're better, quote unquote, better at learning because they have more resources at home that new learning sticks to easily, and then our lower economically, kids get whatever we give them. So, these other kids got a safety net. They got more resources. They got other stuff. That's where I see maybe AI playing a role in education. But again, for real, true learning to happen, you need a physical person in the room, because people make learning happen, not programs.
Right. Okay. And we'll bring that to a close then with that. I really appreciate it. Jason, this has been incredibly valuable. I appreciate you coming in late night. I know you gotta travel tomorrow. And I know probably parents and educators are going to want to go deeper. What is the best place for them to find you, and what should they check out first?
I've got a website just mainly for educators, but parents dig into it too. It's called Let's Quit Teaching. Renamed the book Let's Stop Teaching because it was pandemic time, and the publisher was like, hey, we got enough teachers leaving education. We don't need to give them any more reason. And that's not what it was about.
Yeah.
But it was really just to grab attention, say, let's quit teaching, not a profession, but what we're doing in the classroom. So letsquitteaching.com is my website. There's some content information there. But I do have, I have dipped my toes into AI and took a lot of the learning design concepts that came in the book and transformed them into AI tools. Because what our teachers beg for the most are resources, and they don't have enough time.
Right.
That's why teachers pay teachers became what it was. Well, now I don't know how it's still in business because we have AI, right. But I've trained a lot of custom AI bots and agents and linked them all in one big slide deck on my website. And it's not there to do the work for the teacher. It's there to be a thought partner and have conversations with and talk things out with. But I think currently there might be 25 tools on there. I'm adding more every day. They're all free, all ChatGPT based or Google Gemini based, free to use all over the place for parents and teachers alike.
Okay, awesome. And before we wrap, what's the one thing you want parents or people in general, parents, teachers, to remember from this conversation?
Just that schools, the salaries teachers make, the technologies in the school, the food that that's served, everything is bought and paid for to make learning happen, not for kids to sit and get a grade. And we're not in the factory system anymore. This is our employers, our future employers want kids who can critically think and choose different tools and analyze things and all this other stuff. And that's not what the education world has been the last 100 years. We just wanted them to be able to do something consistently for 8 hours. So I know you can do it when you get out of this school and go work at the factory. So school is about learning. And if there's no evidence of it, then we find out why.
Well, Jason, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing the playbook with us today, talking about actual learning in classrooms. And for everyone listening, remember, you don't have to play the game the way the system is set up. You can find the foundation, you can build the skills, and you can get the result without the burnout. So we're going to put the links to everything we discussed We'll have the Amazon link to Jason's book in the show notes as well. And thank you for tuning into the Supported Learning Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Jason, thank you very much.